All right. So welcome back to Racial and Ethnic Minorities. Today, we are going to cover, I believe it's Essay 3 and Essay 8. So Essay 3 talks about Native American, Indian, Asian, Oriental, Latino, Hispanic, who cares, language, and the power of self-definition. And then we're going to go to Essay 8, which is entitled, My Family Had to Learn English When They Came, So Why Is Everything in Spanish for Them, Race and the Spanish Language in the United States. So these are the two essays that we're going to talk about today. To start, again, like I said last week, you will have a quiz on Monday, September 20th. So if you're watching this on Monday, September 20th, then there's a quiz up. That quiz covers the reading, Essay 3, Native American, Indian Language and the Power of Definition. So it is just over that essay. So that's where you will find the answers to that quiz. The quiz has 5 to 10 questions related to the reading. The questions to the quiz will be available under files, and then it's going to say reading quizzes. So if you go to files, if you go to reading quizzes, you'll see a document that says entitled Quiz 1 Language. So at 1 p.m. on Monday, September 20th, it will be available. You will have 24 hours. So you will have until 1 p.m. September 21st, Tuesday, to complete it. Okay, so as soon as you see it, I would suggest you go ahead and start with that. So on a separate Microsoft Word document, you can record your answers to the questions. And then when you get done, you're going to go to the assignments link, and it says, click on it says reading quizzes. And that's where you will upload the answers. It's going to say Quiz 1 Language. You're going to upload your answers there. After the deadline is over, no submissions after the deadline will be graded under any circumstances. So if you say, oh, I thought it was due, sometimes I get students who may say that. Yeah, I'm sorry that, it's just that's the cutoff. And it says that in the syllabus as well. So after that quiz, it's a wrap. After that deadline, it's a wrap. If you have any questions, reach out to me during office hours, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you have. Again, the deadline for the quiz is September 21st, 1 p.m. on Tuesday. So make sure you get it in by that time, okay? All right. So that is your quiz 1. So again, hopefully you're watching this before that. All right. So before we get started, I want us to watch this video. We're going to watch a few minutes of it. And I want you, as you're watching this, I want you to think of some concepts. Hopefully you've already read the material. What concepts from your reading can you find in this routine? Okay. What can you find in this? What concepts from your reading can you find in this routine? Some of the things that we will discuss. So let me get ready to share the screen. Okay.
Santiago! All right, let me just ask, though I know where I'm at with you people. Everybody here speaks Spanish, right? All right, because I don't want to lose anybody when I go into Telemundo mode. Although they don't make it easy for you to be bilingual in this country. I was trying to write my mother a very simple little email. Mami, I'll see you mañana. It doesn't get any simpler than that. You know, but to get the ñ, the N with a little squiggly over it that gives you the ñ sound. First of all, that's not just a letter in the alphabet for us, okay? That is a symbol of our identity. We are the ñ gente, the ñ people. And it's not on the keyboard. And to get it is so ridiculously convoluted. On a PC, it's like Alt Shift 1 6 4. I forget what foot you have to be standing on. It's very ridiculous. And the only word in the English language that has the ñ in it, officially the only one, in the dictionary, in the software, in the spell check, the only one is piñata. So I have to write piñata. And then cut and paste. That's terrible when the discrimination is actually coded right into the software. I don't know what I would do without Spanish or Spanglish, you know. That's the language I grew up with. My mother instilled a sense of discipline, switching back and forth between English and Spanish. Whenever my three brothers got out of hand, se los estoy advirtiendo for the last time. No me hagan pasar un mal rato, because por mi madre, se los juro, if I have to pull this car over, everybody se va a llevar un cocotazo. That's not an easy thing to pull off. But Spanish has reached an entirely different level now, you know? I'm hearing a lot of Spanglish advertising now. La nueva variety bucket de Kentucky Fried Chicken. Cada pedacito de pollo frito está finger-licking delicioso. Sometimes it's a very spontaneous thing. Like I was at a party and someone says, hey, how do you say trick or treat in Spanish? Stumped everybody. Finally, someone said, pues, trick or treat.
Okay. So in looking at that stand-up routine, and oftentimes I like to use stand-up, because I do think stand-up comedians have a very interesting way of looking at the world. And I also think that they have a way of taking something that is serious, making it funny, and then making it, and then when you're laughing, it's more digestible, right? You can kind of see things from a different perspective. And I think comedians have a way of teaching the world about itself, again, in a way that makes it a lot easier to handle, and then hopefully can lead to some kind of change. And so again, we're going to go through this lecture, and you're going to be able to see kind of like some ideas around what he's talking about, particularly around discrimination, around Spanish and English, and which one is deemed the language that is the most acceptable by society, and not just US society, but global society, and what that means for people who don't speak English, who do speak English, who are bilingual, who speak both, and how this all relates to race and ethnicity and racism. So to start off, I want you to think of, you don't have to say it out loud. If we were in class, actually, I do have a friend who's a professor. She's a white woman, and she does give the students the option to say these terms out loud, but I just don't feel comfortable doing that. But I want you to think of several derogatory names, phrases, and terms that are used to describe people of color, right? So just think of those terms that you have probably heard, you've seen, you've heard other people say and get in trouble for it. And so just think about what those terms are, right? Now, obviously, the reason why we won't say these words is because it is taboo, right? It's inappropriate, it's offensive, and in many ways, it's illegal to say these words out loud. When you're describing people of color, there are also words that are used to describe women, words that are used to describe people within the LGBTQ community. And so there are these phrases and these words that because of, and we'll talk about that in a second, but because of civil rights laws and things of that nature, you can be fired, you could be arrested, you can definitely serve additional time if those words are used while committing a crime, because then it is automatically labeled as a hate crime. So, and sometimes, your sentence or your punishment can be even more, uh, uh, extended because it's a hate crime. And even though we know those words, so we're not going to say those words, and a lot of times those words aren't said in public. They may be said in private, but they're not said in public. There are other words and phrases that we say that may not be explicitly racist, but they can still evoke a similar feeling, right? They can still evoke a similar feeling. A lot of times, and I've even seen this term. I was really, I didn't realize people still said this word, but I've even graded papers here at UNF and have seen the word color to describe a person of color, or particularly Black people. And that's not an appropriate term, right? It may not be as bad as the derogatory term that we think about when people describe and they want to be hurtful and offensive to describe a Black person, which is the N-word. So some people may say, oh, well, it's not like saying the N-word, but still saying the word color is outdated, is antiquated, and is not proper. And so the term that people generally use, some people say minority, some people say people of color, some people say BIPOC, Black Indigenous people of color, when describing certain groups, right? Particularly Black folks or people of color. But to call someone colored is not appropriate, right? So again, it may not be explicitly racist, like some words that we can think of that are just outright derogatory, but still evoke the same emotions. Illegal alien, you probably heard this term before. Sometimes this term is used to describe immigrants who have not completed the immigration process, right? Or in the process of completing the immigration process. And so sometimes people have used the term illegal alien. And while that may not be as bad as some other terms, that is not, that can still evoke some negative feelings as well. Thug, right? That has oftentimes been used in place of the N-word. So particularly if you're talking about a Black or Latino person, instead of calling them the N-word or calling them another term that is inappropriate, sometimes people may say, oh, they're just a bunch of thugs. And thugs kind of, even if the person is not a so-called thug or is not doing anything wrong, but the way they look or the way they talk or the way they act, or because their attitude or their behavior may not be as becoming as another person thinks that it should be, that they're labeled a thug. And a lot of times that word thug has been used as a substitute for the N-word, right? So again, we have to be mindful of these terms and other terms that are used that can evoke similar feelings. So language is extremely important. When we're talking about race, when we're talking about race and class, when we're talking about power, language is super important. And when most people think about racism, oftentimes we think about the very overt actions, right, of racism. We think about the KKK and somebody riding in on a horse and burning a cross or hanging somebody from a tree, or, and it doesn't even have to go that far. We think about people getting refused service, people being called derogatory terms, people being beat up, being shot and killed by, unarmed people being shot and killed by police officers, or not even just police officers, but even someone like a George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin, where this person was not a law enforcement officer, but they were just another resident. And so obviously there was a lot of racial implications around that. And so typically when we think about racism, we think about things that go that far. But racism is not just that. right? There are these microaggressions around racism. There is language power around racism. There's systemic racism, which is embedded into the very structure of our society. And so the civil rights movement helped to ensure that the state supported victims of these crimes. Prior to the civil rights movement, you could call a person a derogatory term on television, on radio, and nothing would happen. And so, so the state, again, and making sure that the governments, our federal government as well as our state governments, supported those victims of that crime. If you have been called a derogatory term or have been, racially profiled, then it's at least more likely now than it was then that something will happen to you, even if it's not 100% justice. Something might, something may happen to a person who is the perpetuator of something like that. So when a person asks a perceived person of color, what are you? It's another way that race and language and identity get carried out. So we may not use a derogatory term, but we may ask a question, and it sounds harmless. If somebody came up to you and asked you, what are you? I guess it sounds harmless. Maybe they're just trying to figure out where you're from. But what that does is there's a coded kind of implication there that says, when I say, well, what are you? I'm basically saying you're not from here or you don't belong here. You must be from somewhere else. I need to find that out so that now I can apply certain stereotypes or generalizations possibly to you. So when you ask a person, what are you? How does that reinforce a racial bias? And it can, because it asks a person, what is one's identity? It asks a person, what is your identity? But who gets to decide that? Because when asking a person that, you may ask a person that because you feel like they don't look normal or they don't look like you. And so it can be very offensive to ask a person, what are you or where are you from? Unless, they mention it. So they say, oh, well, I'm from England. Oh, what part of England are you from? And then they can say Birmingham, Manchester, London, whatever. So the decision of identity is oftentimes placed not just on the individual, but it's also placed on the society as well. Society has always politicized identity. Whether we start with the one drop rule during slavery, if you have one drop of Black blood in you, then you're Black. And that means you are subject to enslavement, you are subject to sharecropping, you are subject to being a second-class citizen. So it's always been politicized. Being passing, I don't know if you've ever heard of passing, but passing was when, particularly in the early 20th century, early to mid 20th century, when you had Black people who were born extremely light, sometimes so light that they looked white and you could not tell the difference. All right. And many times they would straighten their hair really, really straight. Sometimes they would, put things on their hair to burn their hair so that it was straight, and then use that as a way of passing, which means moving about the world as if they're white, and they're really not. But it was necessary because they knew why. They would get better opportunities, they would get better positions, life would be easier for them if nobody knew that they were actually mixed race or a person of color or a Black person. Then you think about the decision of identity has also been politicized with our very first Black president. If you've done any history on Barack Obama, you'll see that in 1990, he was the first African-American to be voted as I think it was the editor of the Harvard Law Review in Harvard's history. No other person had had that opportunity. And so he was the first Black, and if you read the story, I think it was like a page in the New York Times or something. If you read the story, you can look it up. It says, first Black person to be editor of the Harvard Law Review. Yeah, blah, 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 we're making strides. 17 years later, he's running for president. Everybody's asking him, well, your mom's white, your dad's Black. Who are you? How do you identify? How do you identify? Because when it's looking like he's about to win the presidency, now people are saying, well, he's not Black, he's mixed race. He's not Black, he's mixed race. He's not Black, he's mixed race. Well, how can he be mixed race now? But 17 years ago, when he became the editor of the Harvard Law Review, he was Black. Still had the same mama, still had the same daddy. But now that he is getting ready to possibly become the president of the United States, now people want to take away just the Black identity and say, no, now we got to add on the other part of the identity. But when he was just editor of the Harvard Law Review, it actually looked good to Harvard to have a Black person be the editor now to show that they were making strides. So to say, no, let's not say he's mixed race, let's say he's Black. Politicized. Identity is very much politicized. Another way is saying Indians versus Native Americans. When you say Native Americans, it shows, oh, if they're Native Americans, then they're native to the country. And if they're native to the country, then how can somebody else say they discovered it? So when you say Native Americans, you're essentially pushing back against the idea of Columbus discovering America. Because there are people who have been there for thousands of years before he got there. But if we say Indians, then we're calling them what Columbus called them, which is these people that resided in India, that he thought, because he thought he was an Indian, and he was not. So again, language is very much politicized, the decision of identity and how your identity is labeled and called. A lot of politics around that. Okay. One of the things that they discussed in this text was endonyms and exonyms. And so if you read page 26 and go to that paragraph that says one way to think about, and then go to the last couple sentences, go to the sentence that says as time. And it says, as time has passed and overt imperial domination has largely waned, replaced by a system of global capitalism, many racial and ethnic groups have attempted to shed historically subjugating exonyms, or terms for a group created by an outside dominant group, for endonyms, or terms for a group created by the group members themselves. So the difference between exonyms and endonyms is exonyms is what you decide to call me. And endonym is what I decide to call me. And so, or people in my group decide to call each other. So for example, Latino is an endonym. That is the name that Latinx people have chosen. They chose that name. The term Hispanic literally refers to anybody who is Spanish speaking. And so on that hand, it's an exonym because outside people came up with that term to describe people who spoke Spanish, people who were of Latinx culture. So there's a difference between exonyms and endonyms. And so even if you look at, and this goes beyond just race, this goes to race, to sexuality, to, so if you look at the term Latinx, or actually if you go down to, see where, so you know what, it might be on another, oh yeah, here it is. Go to page 28 and go to the last sentence. Adding a further level of complexity, many use the term Latina, Latino, or Latinx as to not normalize the masculine and devalue the feminine. So sometimes people use the term Latinx because if a person is male and Latino, then they are called Latino. If a person is a woman and Latina, then she's labeled Latina. But what about those people that do not subscribe to being male or female, or man or woman? Then they are called Latinx. And we stop saying Latino, Latina, Latino, Latina, because there may be some people of Latin descent that don't identify with either gender. So some exonyms are more offensive than others to some or most people of color. So again, let's go back to page 26 and reading the bottom of it. Interestingly, Pew research from 2012 indicates that most Hispanic Latinos, 51%, surveyed prefer their family's country of origin as a descriptor of their ethnicity, meaning they prefer not to use pan-ethnic terms such as Hispanic or Latino and instead identified as Mexican, Cuban, or Dominican. For example, only about 1/4 say they use Hispanic or Latino, most often to describe their identity. Regarding the terms Hispanic and Latino, most, 51%, had no preference for either term. Had no preference for either term. And then if we go to the bottom of 27, it says Asian American is slowly replacing Oriental. Interestingly though, more than 3/4 of Asian Americans do not often describe themselves with the terms Asian or Asian American. Instead, most prefer to use their country of origin to define themselves. And then if you go down to the bottom of page 28, that is where we talked about Latinx. So if we look at it, we see that preference is with the specificity. And you're going to hear me say that again. It's better to be specific if you can. If you can't be specific, if you have to be general and say Asian American or African American or whatever, then you can do that. It's not going to be, generally, it won't be looked at as offensive. It's not as bad as saying colored or using the N-word. Okay, so these are the ways in which we can begin, ways to think about this idea of linguistic power and how power plays a role in language. The power of language plays a role in definition. So why? Well, actually, before we get into that, moving forward, when we look at the term white and we see white, white generally means white. If you see that being as a description, you automatically have something in your head. White means white. If you see black, black means black. And all people of color means non-white. But using these terms, depending on what they are, can be problematic. And depending on how you use them. And so why can calling a person of color non-white reinforce race and racial bias? And if we think about it, telling a person that they're non-white is basically saying that that white is the reference category, that white is what's normal. And so it basically uses that as the standard or the measure of normality, and then everything else is compared to that. And why not? Why can't another group be considered the reference category? Why can't we say black and non-black, or Asian and non-Asian, or person of color and non-person of color? Right? Because actually, there are more people of color in the world than there are white people. So by population-wise, people of color would be the majority. But we don't measure minority and majority based on size. If that was the case, women are the majority in the United States, because there's more women than there are men. But minority and majority are based on power, who has access to power, which is why men are said that they are the majority, because they have the most access to power. And globally, white people, Europeans, Westerners have more access to power than people of color, which is why they are the ones that are considered to be the majority. But I'm going off topic, sorry. So calling people of color non-white reinforces this racial bias, right? It reinforces this racial bias. It basically calls one thing normal and then another thing abnormal. And so what are the terms associated with white or whiteness? So if we look at what is called white or what is called whiteness, oftentimes we see one thing that we call white or whiteness is Caucasian. Caucasian. But why is that inaccurate? They talked about it in your reading. Go to page 31. If we go to where it says the confusion over these terms, midway through, it says the term, however, comes from a misunderstanding about race that began in 1795. A German anthropologist named Johann Blumenbach theorized that the ancestral homeland of white Europeans was in the Caucasus Mountains of what is today the border between Russia and Georgia. While scientists discredit this theory long ago, use of the term has persisted. But white, which came about in the 1600s, is actually a better term. So even though it's already been disputed that white people don't necessarily come from the mountains of Caucasus between Russia and Georgia, we still use the term. So language is very complicated. It's a complicated structure. It is connected to an even more complex history, psychology, social experiences of people, of a person, of a group of people. And this is why it is very difficult to create a solution that applies to all people of all experiences. Because you may be telling me, well, Dr. Grant, I don't know what to say then, because if I can't say this, if I can't say that, but if I just see a person, I don't know if they're from Mexico, or if they're from Spain, or if they're from Brazil, or I don't know. I just know that they're Spanish speaking, but you say I can't say Hispanic because that's an exonym and I need to be specific, but I don't know where they're from. Or an Asian person or a Black person. Do I say Black? Do I say person of color? Do I say African American? But not all of them are African American. Some may be from the Caribbean. So and then depending on who you talk to, certain things are more offensive than other people. I know some people that don't like to be called Black, and they're Black. They prefer African American. Some even don't like African American. They say, I'm just American. I don't like labels. I'm just American. I'm like, there's a label. Being called an American is a label. And so, and I have my own thoughts about that. But regardless of what I think, there are some people who like certain terms and other people who don't like certain terms. Some people, they say, can get away with saying certain terms and some people can't. So it is very complicated, and it's very structural as well as it's individual. However, I can't speak for every single person. I'm just talking about these structural issues around language. But that's why I say we have to continue to evolve with it, and specificity is preferred, meaning do the best you can to know, the person's specific identity. And then actually, if all else fails, just ask them. Just ask them, hey, how would you like for me to identify you, or to how do you identify? And they can just decide. They can just decide. And so let's look at this. I wanted to look at this link called 8 Sneaky Racial Code Words. And some of these I've heard, some of these I would agree with, others maybe not so much. But I do think that it's interesting. So let's look at 8 sneaky racial code words. And so inner city is a word that oftentimes is used to describe particularly Black people. All right, this is a piece written in the Root. Who wrote this? I think it's oh, they don't have the person's name. Somebody who works at the Root. Ian Haney Lopez, author of Dogmas of Politics: How Coded Racial Appeals Have Reinvented Racism and Wrecked the Middle Class. Oh, okay, so this is based on that person's work. So inner city, you can't publicly say Black people don't like to work, but you can say there's an inner city culture in which generations of people don't value work. That's basically saying the same thing. You know, those inner city youth, you know, we gotta help those inner city youth who are just prone to crime. Well, typically when you say inner city, you're talking about Black, even though the inner city is actually now more white because of gentrification. But people still say inner city. There's actually a lot of those same Black people that did live in the inner city in the 1930s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s before hypergentrification. Yeah, they were predominantly Black, but it's not like that anymore. States' rights. States' rights is another way, another kind of coded language that is used. Lopez says, we first heard this from Barry Goldwater. Actually, I'll probably say we heard states' rights even back in the Civil War. And it was during the election, he makes the critical decision to use coded racial appeals, trying to take advantage of rising racial anxiety in the face of the civil rights movement. And typically what we've seen is that when we leave options to the state, to each state, that is a lot of times where you find the most discrimination, right? So Reconstruction, shortly after the Civil War, was the time in which the federal government kind of took control over what was happening in the South. Well, that worked for Black people because when the federal government took over, it was less discrimination. The KKK did still become a thing at that time, but it was less discrimination. When Reconstruction was over was when Rutherford B. Hayes, the president, in order to be president, gave the state's rights back to the states. That's when we had Jim Crow, right? So again, states' rights is oftentimes kind of coded language for race as well. Forced busing is another term that was used to try to force people to integrate. A lot of racial implications around forced busing. Cut taxes. When Ronald Reagan said cut taxes, what he was communicating to the middle class was, so your taxes won't be wasted on minorities. So when people are trying to cut taxes, or they're trying to cut your taxes, that's what they're meaning, right? Because people want to tax you, or they want to tax the rich. Taxes is just a coded language of saying, oh yeah, you want to tax the rich, you want to tax the people that have money so they can take care of those people who don't. Law and order is another phrase that is used. Law and order presidents that are all about law and order, meaning those presidents who are serious about crime, which generally means those presidents who have participated heavily in mass incarceration. Because when we talk about law and order presidents, when we talk about heavy on crime presidents, generally that has negative effects on Black men. Welfare and food stamps, that is another way of hiding the language of the poor Black woman or the welfare queen who's just sitting on her couch getting money and not actually working. Sharia law, I believe it's Sharia law. When the Bush administration became intent on linking the war in Iraq to hijackers who were from Saudi Arabia, to get there, you convince America that this threat is internal as well. New brown immigrants who are threatening the heartland, he says. A prime example is Kansas prohibiting courts from drawing on the Sharia law. It's not a threat at all. The point isn't the reality, it's the racial framing. The point is these brown Muslim people are infiltrating our country, so be afraid and vote politicians who will support the right wing. So this notion of Sharia law is another example of racial coded language. And then we talked about illegal alien earlier as well. All right. So that is that. Now let's go to essay 8. Essay 8. And we start with page 85. Language is inextricably linked to race and racialization in the United States. Okay, so when we think about language, it automatically is linked to race. And we understand and construct language based on what we think a person's race is or their social position. Okay, so one of the biggest myths that people have, particularly around Spanish-speaking people or Latinx people, is that Spanish is spoken by undocumented poor immigrants from Latin America. They're the ones that are speaking Spanish. If you hear somebody speaking Spanish, particularly a Latinx person, they must be poor, they must be an immigrant, they must be undocumented. When we hear them speaking Spanish, and if they look a certain way, look like a worker, then, oh, they must be undocumented, they must be here illegally. So language has proletarianized and racialized this group, stuck them in these kind of racial stereotypes and made them poor or working class. But if we think about it, it's much bigger than just race and class, particularly race and class in the United States. Historically, Spanish has been part of the United States for hundreds of years because there were certain parts of northern Mexico that was a part of the United States. If you go back to the, I think it's the Mexican-American War, or either the Mexican-American War or Spanish-American War, one of those. Can't remember right offhand right now. But all of that was a part of the United States. And then over time, there was this breaking up of, okay, well, you can keep this part, you can keep that part, and then they redrew the boundaries to what it is now. But Spanish and Spanish speakers are viewed now as unwilling to be American, which reifies these anti-immigrant ideas. They're unwilling to assimilate. They don't want to be American. They want to take over America. We've heard that before. Right? Even though for a long time these groups were a part of us. So that's how we know that it's socially constructed. It's not even real because 100 years ago, maybe 120 years ago, 30 years ago, that was those lands weren't a problem. Another thing to think about, how does society view certain Spanish-speaking countries or Latinx countries? Because that's another thing, it's not all Latinx people. It's not all people who speak Spanish. There are some people that we hold in higher regard than we do other people. Give you a perfect example. I've had friends tell me, actually I had like 2 friends recently, both Black, tell me, oh, I really want to go to Portugal. I want to go to Portugal, I want to go to Portugal. And when they talked about why they wanted to go to Portugal, it was because, part of it was because of the way in which it was kind of like, again, Europeanized. It had this kind of exotic view to it. But then sometimes when we think about Mexico, on the other hand, Mexico, Mexicans, there's this negative view about Mexico, unless you're going to Cancun. But unless you're saying Cancun, or is it Punta Cana? I think it's Punta Cana. Or any of those places, if it's not one of those areas, it's not held in high regard. Or if somebody says, I want to go to Spain, ooh, that sounds good. I went to Spain for vacation and it was beautiful. We did this and we did that. I went to Mexico. Oh, did you go to Cancun or Punta Cana? No. Why did you go to Mexico then? Right? So it's not even just about the language itself. It's about which parts and where those parts are situated. Where is Spain and Portugal situated? In Europe. Where is Mexico situated? Closer to the Caribbean. When you think about Caribbean, you think about enslaved territory, you think about Black people, you think about the area where a lot of Native Americans were pushed to. You think about the areas, and the reason why they speak Spanish is because Spain and Portugal conquered those areas. Those areas were originally made up of not Europeans, but people of color. Before they were then, they were the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Incas, and then they were taken over by the Europeans. So if we go to, just want to share this screen really quickly to talk about it. So how Americans view Spain. Thank you. I was going to say, is it going to come up? So if we look at that, we see some people say, oh, good food, nice climate, passionate people, colonized a large chunk of the Americas, right? I've only visited, which was, well, they say it was full of drunk Irish folks in Barcelona, right? I love Spain, motorcycle racing, and the people are just so relaxed. When people ask, how do Americans view Spain? Now let's look at how people look at Mexico. When you Google how Americans see Mexico, it's the biggest thing, the main thing people think about. I don't know if you've ever done one of these before, but you ask a series of questions about how people relate to something, and then the one that comes up the most is the biggest. And then the terms get smaller as, you know, as there's less and less people who use that term to describe that. So first thing people think about, drugs, Mexico, drugs. Other big terms, what do we see? Corrupt, PO, I'm assuming that means poor. Crime, this was only what, 4 or 5 years ago. Cartels. What are some of the smaller phrases? Food, tourism, warm, culture, vacation, people, right? Those are some of the smaller terms. Friendly. But the big one is drugs. So again, it just goes to show that this thing is definitely, it's not just about language, it's racially motivated. And it's racially motivated based on what race you are connected to. Both groups speak Spanish. So it can't be about that. Right? So again, it's less about speaking Spanish and more about the racial narratives associated with the people that are speaking the language. And oftentimes these ideas, they start at the top. They start at the top. I want you to watch this. I don't want to share it because I don't know if it's going to actually show or not, or play. Last time it got cut off by YouTube. But I want you to watch this link so that we can see sometimes these negative views start from the people that are in charge. All right. So again, we can kind of see when some of our leaders or political figures, people that we that represent or supposed to represent the country, sometimes these negative views can start there and then trickle down. So let's look at page 88. Page 88. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the first couple sentences and the last couple sentences. And it says actual data on language use, you get language use and attitudes / beliefs among Latina or Latinos show a similar pattern of linguistic assimilation as that found in other ethnic and racial groups, including European immigrants, namely near to total loss of the family's heritage language by the third generation, going down to where it says of all Hispanics surveyed. Of all Hispanics surveyed, 38% reported being Spanish dominant, 38% reported being bilingual, and 24% reported being English dominant. By the third generation and higher, 1% reported being Spanish dominant, 29% bilingual, and 69% reported being English dominant. Where do dominant beliefs about Latinos' linguistic use and attitudes come from? So there's this idea that, oh, Spanish-speaking people, Latina people, Latinx people, all they want to do is just speak Spanish and they don't want to integrate and assimilate. Well, that just goes to show only 1%, by the time you get to a third generation, only 1% are Spanish dominant. The rest of them either only speak English or speak both. So that gets rid of that myth. So typically what so then it's not a race thing, it's a generational thing. If you just come to the country for the first time, then naturally you're gonna speak your language, native language, more than the language there. If you're an English speaking person and you move to France, you're gonna be English dominant. And then your kid will be more French dominant, then your grandkid will probably speak way more French and way less English. It has less to do with race and less to do with race and more to do with generation. So white middle class English is a core component of US nationalism. It is a way in which we can marginalize people and we nationalize people, or we present a certain level of pride, and not a healthy, and sometimes it's a healthy pride, but sometimes we use it as a way of discriminating against other groups. And this is indoctrinated in three ways. It's indoctrinated in the media, in the politics, and in the education. Okay. And so we have to be careful about that. These are the ways in which we use language to indoctrinate people. Speaking Spanish, again, determines who has access to what rights. If a person is speaking Spanish, then oftentimes we use that as a way of telling them they can or they can't do something. Or if a person is Spanish speaking and they're looking for a house, oh, they probably can't afford this one. No, we probably should look at it in this other area of town. Well, you didn't ask that person what they did for a living. If you're a realtor, they could be a lawyer, they could be a professor, they could be a business person, CEO. So Spanish is absolutely a way of reinforcing racist ideas. And now we are going to go to some of the theories about race and language that helps us as scholars to be able to make sense of how language is used as a way of reifying and reinforcing racist and racial ideas. One is Joe Fagan. Joe Fagan in not Racial Formation, but the White Racial Frame. I want to say they talk about it. Do they talk about Joe Fagan in here? I don't know if they do. Oh yeah, they do. Yeah, at the bottom of 89 and top of 90. So Joe Fagan talks about how whiteness is embedded in the political, historical, economic, and linguistic formation of the United States. So again, going back to systemic racism, that's that systemic racism argument. He already talks about the political, historical, economic. We did a whole lecture on that. But he's also saying even in the way language is formed, there are certain phrases that can't be expressed in English that can only be expressed in another language. So for example, I had a friend who was learning, she was in South Africa for a while. And while in South Africa, she was studying abroad and talking to the people there. She was trying to explain something in English, and they said, there's no phrase for that in South Africa. And then there were certain things that they were trying to explain there, and they said the only way I can say it is in this language, because there's certain ideas, there's a certain culture within the language, and what you want to portray is built in that language. I remember when I was taking a theology course. Well, in taking theology, I had to learn Greek and Hebrew. And so what I found out was that in Greek, there is no past tense for love. This is what I was taught. There's no past tense for love. And in English, you can say, I love somebody, I loved somebody, or maybe I will love somebody. I will love them. Or, yeah, I loved that person once. It's not uncommon. But in the Greek, you can't say I loved somebody, because to them, it doesn't make sense. Once you love somebody, you always love them. You can't stop. There is no past tense for love. And if you decided that you no longer love that person, then you never loved them at all. So once you love somebody, it's always in the present tense. I thought that was fascinating. But that's the way the Greeks saw love. Maybe the English or Americans don't necessarily see it that way. So again, language is a part of the culture and the way you think, and you structure your language based on it. That's what Fagan is saying. Eduardo Bonilla Silva says, within language, there is a perceived cultural deficiencies in people of color. So there's this automatic assumption. He talks about this in Racism Without Racists. We talked about that. Bonilla Silva, I believe, last week. So there's these perceived cultural differences in people of color, right? That they're automatically lower or less than, or don't value education, or don't value family, or whatever, because they're a person of color. And how do we label that? Sometimes through language. And then you have Leo Chavez. He talks about the Latino threat. And there are three ways in which this Latino threat oftentimes gets stereotyped. One is when a person says that the Latino groups want to reclaim part of the United States as theirs. So they're saying, yeah, we remember when we took the Southwest part from y'all. Now you're trying to get it back. That's why y'all are coming to this country and taking over. And now we have to learn Spanish. And now you can't even go to certain cities without knowing Spanish. It's not fair. You're trying to take back the United States from us. It's rightfully ours. Other people say, another part of the Latino threat says, y'all want to assimilate. Y'all don't want to assimilate. You come to this country and you want us to assimilate to you, but you don't want to assimilate to us. You don't want to learn English. Well, we just saw that the statistics show that's not true. Another part of the Latino threat says that they want to gain power through mass migration and reproduction. They keep coming to our country and we keep letting them. That's why we need to build this wall. Build the wall so they won't come into our country and try to take over. And they come into our country and have all these babies. Then they want to take over the voting rights and all of that. So these are the three ways in which Leo Chavez, a scholar, it says it is used to present this Latino threat and spread the sense of fear to the entire nation. And then this is what we call linguistic terrorism. The ways in which people and groups use language to put hierarchies on people based on race, class, and gender. That's what all of this is. It's essentially linguistic terrorism. Okay, and so it's extremely important for us to realize that it's unfair to terrorize people based on their language. We have to be very mindful of how we use language And also mindful of how we use language to reinforce or stereotype other groups of people. Okay. Now, what I would like for you to do is for your activity for this week, you're going to do a linguistic autobiography, which is on page 96, but you're going to do it in the discussion board. So you're going to complete it. You're going to do the page 96, 97. You're going to do that. And then, and I'll go over it in more detail in a second. And then you're going to post, just like how you did last time, you're going to post the discussion. You're going to answer that question on the discussion board. And then you're going to respond to somebody else's. And these are pretty long. So some of these you can kind of combine the questions and answer those because there's a lot of questions. And so, but yeah, I'll go over it in detail in a second. So yeah, you must post at least twice to each discussion board unless otherwise indicated. One post should be your response to the question posed in the discussion board. The other post should be a thoughtful response to another student's post. And so, and you've done this before, you can read that. These are the requirements for your post. So you can read that yourself on the next slide. And so what you are required to do is you are required to engage, and call it linguistic autobiography. You are required to engage in the discussion board entitled Linguistic Autobiography. You will answer the questions based on your identity. So if you identify as Black or Black American or African American, you'll answer number 1. Those questions are based on that identity. If you identify as white, you're going to answer that question on your discussion post. If you identify as Latino, so if you identify as white, you're going to answer number 2. If you identify as Latina, Latino, or Latinx, you're going to answer number 3, and so on. If you identify as mixed race, number 4. If you identify as an immigrant, number 5. If none of the above you feel accurately describes you, then you're going to answer number 6. Okay. All the instructions on the previous slide, so the way in which you're supposed to lay it out, all of these should be fulfilled before 1 p.m. on September 27th. That is the deadline. Anything after that is late. Okay. If you have any questions, email me, inbox me, come into my office hours. Let's see. So your exam will be, if you look on your syllabus, so if you're not watching the lecture video and you're just looking at the PowerPoint, then you're going to miss it. So you need to watch the lecture video to get the details of this. I'm putting up your syllabus right now. So your exam 1 will be on October 1st. October 1st. So I don't know when you're watching the video, but yeah, it will be on October 1st. And I believe your exam, yeah. So yeah, it'll be, oh yeah, so October 1st. It'll be available as soon as October 1st hits, okay? And you'll have all day on Friday to complete the exam. You have all day on Friday to complete the exam. So this has been up here for a while, so that way you can lay out the time, just in case you have something else going on, or if you have to work, you can complete it when you get off work or before work, but you have all day to complete it. So if you need to do it in the morning, so that before you go to work or after you get off work, when you come home, but it's been on the syllabus, so that way you already know that it's there, okay? So October 1st, exam 1, and so far I haven't heard that anybody can't take the exam on that day, so I do expect you to complete it. Let's see. So I think the late assignments, if you go to your syllabus, it basically tells you All three of your exams, exam 1, 2, and 3, will be comprised of multiple choice, fill in the blank. In short answer questions, I will also require you to define key terms. These exams will be based on information in the class, okay? So in order to study for your exam, I would basically say make sure that you are keeping up with the lectures, the PowerPoints, and you've taken notes. You don't have to reread anything. I wouldn't suggest rereading all of that material. I will focus on the notes that you've been taking from the lectures. I will focus on the lecture points from the PowerPoints. That's what I will focus on. So it says if you submit any assignment or your final paper up to 24 hours after the deadline, the highest grade you can receive on the assignment, if you go, this is down to your late assignment policy, highest grade you can receive on the assignment or your final paper is a 75. If you submit the assignment or your final paper 24 to 48 hours after the original deadline, it's a 50. After that, there is no grade. Then it says this policy does not apply to quizzes or exams. Quizzes are not allowed to be submitted after the deadline, no exceptions. I will make adjustments to this policy only under, certain situations. Regarding late submissions on exams, those are to be announced, okay? So October 1st, you have all day to complete the exam. Anytime after that, if you turn it in anytime after that, significant points off. Either that or it will not be graded at all. So maybe if you turn it in the next day, highest maybe you can get is a 50 or a 60. And then after that, if you take 2 days, no. So at the very least, even if you complete it the next day and turn it in, you'll get some points. You won't get a 0, but after that, it's a no-go. So details are at the end of the lecture. What I'll say is, if you submit the exam late, exam 1 day late, 1 day late, the highest grade you will receive is a 60. The highest grade you can receive is a 60. Anytime after that, it will not be graded. Or you will receive a 0. That will be a grade. Then after that is a 0. So details are at the end of the lecture. If you submit the exam 1 day late, the highest grade you can receive is a 60. Anytime after that 24-hour window is a 0. So I hope that's understood. Again, it's been in your syllabus, so you know when the exam is coming. So hopefully you have cleared your schedule. That is that. Again, study your lecture notes, go back and study your PowerPoints. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And it will be, for the most part, multiple choice, fill in the blank, something like that. Likely, probably won't be essays or anything. I don't plan on putting that on there. Let's see. Oh, also, your personal essay, that is due soon. If you have any questions, I've had some people ask me, but it's pretty, I believe I covered that in the first video, but it's pretty straightforward, your personal essay. Generally, I say everything has to be Times New Roman, double space, all of that. I forgot to put that in there, so it doesn't have to be, but obviously I don't want you to, do 20-something font trying to get 3 to 5 pages. That's not gonna work for me. You know what kind of font you're supposed to write in, and double space and that sort of thing. And yeah, we went over this, but you're basically gonna write a critical essay about your physical location and how it connects to race. And I want you to grapple with some of the things that we've talked about: social construction, your racial identity, your experiences with race. When was the first time you realized that race played an important role in your life or the people around you? Describe it, what happened, who and what was included, what did you learn? How have you understood and interacted with race since then? How have you responded to race and racialized happenings since then? What don't you understand about race? Reflect on these changes that have happened throughout your life. Have these changes shaped the way you understand race and racial interactions? If so, how? All of those questions. And I want you to cite at least 3 to 5 sources from the class readings in your essay. And it is due September 22nd by 11:59. So make sure you turn that in by that time. September 22nd, 11:59. Okay. And let me put that personal essay is due September 22nd, 11:59 p.m. Okay. So those are your updates. Can't think of anything else. If you have any questions, reach out to me, email, office hours, inbox, whatever. And yes, hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great week. Hope you're enjoying these lectures. Hope you're participating in the questions, your assignments. You should have some graded by now, and there are more to come, more grades to come. But you know, if you just want to know where you are in the class and where you sit, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll, we can go through some of your grades and that sort of thing. So I don't have a problem doing that for anybody who just wants to come in the office hours and we can look at your grades there. I'll grade everything right in front of you, so we can have that conversation. So don't mind that. Also, if I grade but I don't leave a comment, but you want to know how you got that grade, just reach out to me and I'll explain it to you. You can come in the office hours and I'll talk to you about your grade. Sometimes it's a lot more detailed than I have time to put on every single person's comment board. So just come to me and we can talk about your grade. I don't have a problem with that. All right, with that being said, hope you have a great day, great week, great weekend, and you'll see me later, and hopefully I'll see you in the office hours.